You've been living in the aftermath of something for a very long time. Not a tragedy, not one single defining catastrophe you could point to and say, time's there, that's where it started. It was quieter than that, more like a slow accumulation. A pattern that kept repeating itself in different costumes, different faces, different circumstances, but always landing you in the same emotional place, always leaving you with the same hollowness in the chest, the same exhaustion, the same quiet thought in the middle of the night. Why does this keep happening to me? Virgo, I want you to hear this clearly. That pattern is over, not weakening, not shifting slightly, over. Something broke recently, and you may not have experienced it as a breakthrough. In fact, I'd be willing to guess it felt more like a breakdown or a loss, or just a very ordinary moment of deciding you were done. Done with a situation, done with a version of yourself that kept accommodating what hurt you, done with explaining your needs and watching them dissolve into the air like they were never spoken. The moment itself might have seemed small from the outside, but energetically, something seismic happened. Think of it like this: karmic patterns don't end with fireworks, they end with a quiet refusal. A door closed without drama. A decision made in private that nobody else witnessed, but that rearranged something fundamental in the architecture of your life. You made that decision, and whether you fully recognize what you did or not, the universe registered it. Let me tell you what I keep seeing around your energy, because it's striking. There's this image of a thread, very old, almost amber colored, like something that's been wound tight for years and it's been cut, not frayed, not tangled or knotted into something new, cut clean. And what sits on either side of that cut is almost shocking in its contrast. On one side, everything familiar, the weight of it, the known shape of a life lived inside a particular kind of limitation. And on the other side, open space, the kind of open that feels slightly frightening before it feels like freedom. You're standing right at that cut, right at the edge where familiar becomes unfamiliar. And part of you is still looking back at what you left, not because you want it, but because the open space ahead doesn't have a map yet. That disorientation you've been feeling, that strange mixture of relief and grief and something that doesn't quite have a name yet, that is what liberation feels like before it settles, before the open space starts to feel like possibility instead of exposure. I want to go back for a moment to what this karmic pattern actually was, because naming it matters. Understanding the shape of something is part of how you make sure you don't rebuild it somewhere new. At its core, this pattern was about a certain kind of giving that never returned to you in equal measure. You, with your Virgo nature, your instinct to show love through service, through attention, through being the person who notices the details everyone else overlooks you, have spent years, maybe decades, pouring yourself into things and people and situations that took everything you offered and gave back just enough to keep you there, just enough hope, just enough warmth, just enough intermittent relief that you kept believing the next chapter would be different. It's a particular kind of exhaustion that, not the exhaustion of overwork, the exhaustion of sustained hope against persistent evidence. the exhaustion of being loyal to a version of something that only ever existed in the moments when it wanted something from you. And here's what's so important to understand: you stayed not because you were naive, not because you couldn't see. You stayed because you are someone who genuinely believes in the goodness of things, who gives people the benefit of the doubt with a kind of fierce, almost stubborn faith. That quality, that willingness to believe in potential, is one of your deepest gifts. The karmic lesson was learning where it was being used against you. Have you ever noticed the version of yourself that shows up when you're not trying to manage anyone's feelings? When you're not calculating how your needs will land, or pre apologizing for taking up space, or shrinking something true in yourself to make the room more comfortable for everyone else. That version of you is extraordinary. She is precise and luminous and quietly devastating in the most beautiful way. She is the version that's been waiting, not impatiently, but with a kind of steady, dignified patience for the conditions that finally allow her to exist without compromise. Those conditions are being built right now, not by the universe handing you something, by you having cleared the space, by the cutting of that thread, by the quiet seismic refusal that broke the pattern open and made room for something structurally different to enter. I'm curious, does it feel yet like you've changed? Not dramatically, but in small, unmistakable ways, like the texture of your days is slightly different, like things that used to knock you sideways now just glance off. Now, let's talk about what's coming, because something is, and it arrives in multiple forms, and I want you to understand the full landscape of it rather than just one piece. The first shift is internal, and it's already happening. There's a new relationship forming between you and your own instincts. You've always had exceptional intuition. Virgo energy carries this remarkable capacity for discernment, for reading between the lines of a situation, for noticing the detail that changes everything. But for a long time, you've been overriding that instinct, hearing your gut and then constructing a rational argument against it, sensing something was wrong and then deciding you needed more evidence before you were allowed to act on what you already knew. That override system is losing its power very soon. And I mean this in a time frame that's already in motion. You are going to trust yourself in a way you haven't before. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but with a quiet, grounded certainty that feels like finally speaking your native language after years of translating yourself for everyone else's comfort. This internal shift is the foundation of everything else that's changing. The external life can only reconfigure itself to match what's shifting inside. And what's shifting inside you right now is enormous. The second shift is relational. People are going to show up differently in your life. Some of them have always been there, but at a certain careful distance, drawn to your energy, but somehow waiting for a signal that the force field was down, that you were available in a new way, not desperate, not diminished available, open, like a door that was always beautiful, but had been, until now, partially closed. That door is open, and what walks through it, the quality of connection that begins finding its way into your life, is going to surprise you. Not because it's fantastical or impossible, because it's so straightforward, so uncomplicated, so easy in a way you forgot relationship could feel. You've normalized difficulty. You've normalized the sensation of having to earn your place in your own relationships, of having to justify your presence, of feeling like too much or too little, depending on the weather of someone else's emotional state. And when something arrives that simply receives you as you are, without the calculation, without the push and pull, it's going to feel almost suspicious at first. Let it feel that way, and then let it be real. I want to address something that might be sitting somewhere between your rib cage and your throat right now, a kind of quiet fear that this is too good to believe, that you've been here before on the edge of a new beginning and the pattern found you anyway, that maybe the pattern is just cleverer than you are. Virgo, the pattern found you before because it was operating below the level of your conscious mind. It had roots in places you hadn't excavated yet. It was fed by beliefs so foundational you didn't even know they were beliefs. You thought they were just truth. Things like love requires sacrifice of self, worthiness is earned, need is weakness. If I ask for too much, I will be left. You have done the work even when it didn't feel like work, even when it felt like suffering, even when it felt like nothing was changing and the same wound was just taking a new form. Every single time you survived your own pattern and stayed honest with yourself about it, you were loosening its roots. What happened recently, that decision, that refusal, that moment of saying times no more, times in whatever form it took, was the final root giving way. The tree that grew from those roots cannot regrow. The ground has changed. Something I keep noticing in your energy, and this is specific enough that I want to say it carefully. There is something creative beginning to stir or re-stir, like something you set down a long time ago because the circumstances of your life didn't leave room for it, and now you keep finding yourself thinking about it again, returning to it in small moments, being surprised by how much it still lives in you. Whatever that thing is for you, a creative practice, a dream, a way of moving through the world that once felt like yours before everything else took precedence, give it attention. Don't make it a project yet. Just give it attention. Let it know you haven't abandoned it because it's part of the new architecture of your life and it needs to know the space exists. This is part of what your life looking completely different means. Not just the external rearrangement of circumstances, but the return of you to yourself, the resurrection of the parts that were set aside in service of a version of life that no longer exists. Financially, professionally, I want to touch this area briefly because the energy is real and worth naming. There has been a ceiling, whether visible or not, you've felt it, a sense of limitation in how far you could move, how much you could build, how fully you could step into the version of your work that actually matches what you're capable of. And that ceiling was structural. It was connected to the same energetic pattern that kept you small in other areas. The belief that you should be grateful for what you had rather than expectant of more. The feeling that ambition in you was somehow presumptuous. Watch that ceiling lift, not all at once, in the way that ceilings actually give way gradually and then all at once when the right force meets the right moment. Opportunities will approach from directions you didn't anticipate. A door will open in a place you weren't watching. Someone will speak your name in a room you didn't know you were known in. Stay ready. Not anxiously readiness isn't the same as vigilance. More like the readiness of someone who has set the table and is simply waiting for the guests to arrive. Calm, certain, already knowing there will be enough. Let me tell you about the version of your life that's assembling itself on the other side of this. It's quieter than you might expect from something called a breakthrough. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives in the ordinariness of a Tuesday that feels inexplicably lighter than the Tuesday before it, in the realization that you haven't explained yourself to anyone in several days, in the strange luxury of a conversation that ends and leaves you feeling full rather than emptied. It arrives in the face of someone who looks at you like you are not a problem to be solved or a resource to be used, but a person to be known. It arrives in work that challenges you without diminishing you. In a home that finally feels like yours energetically, emotionally, not just physically. It arrives in mornings that don't begin with dread, in the slow disappearance of that low grade anxiety you've been carrying for so long you stopped noticing it was there until the day it wasn't. And the absence of it felt like the first clear breath after a long illness. This is what your life is about to look like. Not perfect, not frictionless, but genuinely foundationally yours. There's a lightness coming, the kind that isn't manufactured by positive thinking or forced gratitude or convincing yourself to see the bright side, the kind that arrives naturally when the weight that was never yours to carry has been finally, truly set down. You carried so much for so long, for so many people who never asked whether it was costing you something. And you did it because that is the kind of person you are, someone for whom care is not a transaction but a language. But even the most fluent speaker needs sometimes to rest from translation, to exist in their own tongue, to say what they mean and be understood without effort. That rest is arriving for you. Virgo, before I close this, I want to say one thing that I hope lands somewhere deep. You didn't break this curse by becoming someone different. You broke it by finally becoming more fully yourself, by stopping the performance of smallness, by refusing one final time to make your truth negotiable, by choosing in some private, unremarkable, completely important moment to treat your own life with the same devotion you've spent years giving to everyone else's. That is the work. That was always the work. And you did it. The life that's coming doesn't require you to be extraordinary. It just requires you to stop pretending you're less than you are. You've stopped. Everything else is just the world catching up to that. If something in this reading touched a part of your story, a pattern you've been trying to name, a moment you recognized, I'd genuinely love to hear it in the comments. What you share might be exactly what someone else needed to find today.